Sawadee-kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha in Volume 12, which is titled Lowly Arts. We're going to be exploring chapters 21 through 30 today. And the way that I do this program is I invite students who are in Zoom to be able to volunteer to read a chapter from our book. Then after someone reads, I will share some teachings on that. And then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you have, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. You'll be able to ask questions. You can put your questions into the comment section, or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions you like by just unmuting your microphone. And for those of you guys that are in Zoom, if you'd like to volunteer to read, you can electronically raise your hand. I'll be able to see that and call on you, and then you can unmute your microphone and you'll be able to read a chapter. So is there anybody in Zoom who would like to read this first chapter, 21? I don't see anybody raising your hand. I guess nobody would like to read, so I guess we're not going to have class today. We don't have someone to read. Okay, Lucas. Go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can.
Okay. Chapter 21. 6 Unsurpassed Things. Monks, there are these 6 unsurpassed things. What 6? 1. The unsurpassed sight. 2. The unsurpassed hearing. 3. The unsurpassed gain. 4. The unsurpassed training. 5. The unsurpassed service. And 6. The unsurpassed recollection. Recalls, remembers. And what, monks, is the unsurpassed sight? Here someone goes to see the elephant gem, the horse gem, the jewel gem, or to see various sights. Or else they go to see an ascetic or Brahmin of wrong views, of wrong practice. There is this seeing. This I do not deny. But this seeing is low, common, worldly, not honorable, and unbeneficial. It does not lead to freedom from strong feelings, elimination, peace, direct knowledge, experience, enlightenment, and nibbana. When, however, one of the settled confidence, of settled determination, decided, full of confidence, goes to see the Tathagata, or a disciple of the Tathagata, this unsurpassed sight is for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and grief, for the passing away of pain and sadness, for the achievement of the method to attain enlightenment, for the realization of nibbana, enlightenment. This is called the unsurpassed sight. Such is the unsurpassed sight. And how is there the unsurpassed hearing? Here someone goes to hear the sound of drums, the sound of lutes, the sound of singing, or to hear various sounds. Or else they go to hear the teachings of an ascetic or Brahmin, of wrong views, of wrong practice. There is this hearing, this I do not deny, but this hearing is low, common, worldly, not honorable, and unbeneficial. It does not lead to freedom from strong feelings, elimination, peace, direct knowledge, experience, enlightenment, and nibbana. When, however, one of settled confidence, of settled determination, decided, full of confidence, goes to hear the Tathagata or a disciple of the Tathagata, this unsurpassed hearing is for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and grief, for the passing away of pain and sadness, for the achievement of the method to attain enlightenment, for the realization of nibbana, enlightenment. This is called the unsurpassed hearing. Such is the unsurpassed sight and the unsurpassed hearing. And how is there the unsurpassed gain? Here, someone gains a son, a wife, or wealth, or they gain various goods, or else they obtain belief in an ascetic or Brahmin of wrong views, of wrong practice. There is this I do not deny, but this gain is low, common, worldly, not honorable, and unbeneficial. It does not lead to freedom from strong feelings, elimination, peace, direct knowledge, experience, enlightenment, and nirvana. When, however, one of settled confidence, of settled determination, decided, full of confidence, obtains confidence in the Tathagata or in a disciple of the Tathagata, this unsurpassed gain is for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and grief, for the passing away of pain and sadness, for the achievement of the method, total enlightenment, for the realization of nibbana, enlightenment. This is called the unsurpassed gain. Such is the unsurpassed sight, the unsurpassed hearing, and the unsurpassed gain. And how is the unsurpassed training? Here, someone trains in elephantry, in horsemanship, in chariotry, in archery, in swordsmanship, or they train in various fields, or else they train under an ascetic or Brahmin of wrong views, of wrong practice. There is this training, this I do not deny, but this training is low, common, worldly, not honorable, and unbeneficial. It does not lead to freedom from strong feelings, elimination, peace, direct knowledge, experience, enlightenment, and nibbana. When, however, one of settled confidence, of settled determination, decided, full of confidence, trains in the higher virtuous behavior, moral conduct, the higher mind, mental discipline, and the higher wisdom in the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, this unsurpassed training is for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and grief, for the passing away of pain and sadness, for the achievement of the method, total enlightenment, for the realization of nibbana, enlightenment. This is called the unsurpassed training. Such is the unsurpassed sight, the unsurpassed hearing, the unsurpassed gain, and the unsurpassed training. And how is there the unsurpassed service? Here, someone serves a Khattiya, a Brahmin, a householder, or they serve various others, or else they serve an ascetic or Brahmin of wrong views, of wrong practice. There is this kind of service, this I do not deny, but this kind of service is low, common, worldly, not honorable, and unbeneficial. It does not lead to freedom from strong feelings, elimination, peace, direct knowledge, experience, enlightenment, and nirvana. When, however, one of settled confidence, of settled determination, decided, full of confidence, serves the Tathagata or a disciple of the Tathagata, this unsurpassed service is for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and grief, for the passing away of pain and sadness, for the achievement of the method to attain enlightenment, for the realization of nibbana, enlightenment. This is called the unsurpassed service. Thus, there is the unsurpassed sight, the unsurpassed hearing, the unsurpassed gain, the unsurpassed training, and the unsurpassed service. And how is there the unsurpassed recollection, recalls, remembers? Here, someone recollects the gain of a son, a wife, or wealth, or else they recollect various kinds of gain, or else they recollect an ascetic or Brahmin of wrong views, of wrong practice. There is this kind of recollection, this I do not deny, but this kind of recollection is low, common, worldly, not honorable, and unbeneficial. It does not lead to freedom from strong feelings, elimination, peace, direct knowledge, experience, enlightenment, and nirvana. When, however, one of settled confidence, of settled determination, decided, full of confidence, recollects the Tathagata or a disciple of the Tathagata, this unsurpassed recollection is for the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and grief, for the passing away of pain and sadness, for the achievement of the method to attain enlightenment, for the realization of nibbana, enlightenment. This is called the unsurpassed recollection, recalls, remembers. These monks are the six unsurpassed things, having gained the best of sight, and the unsurpassed hearing, having acquired the unsurpassed gain, pleased with the unsurpassed training, attentive in service, they develop recollection connected with seclusion, secure, leading to the deathless enlightenment, joyful in mindfulness, wise, restrained by virtue, practicing moral conduct. In time, they realize where it is that discontentedness is eliminated.
Okay.
In this,
Oh yeah, this is the only part, Lucas. Thank you. Those are the words of the Buddha. What you've got here underneath of this is you've got the reference, which takes you back to the Pali Canon, and then these are the words that I share, but in the class we only read these here, the words of the Buddha. So thank you for that. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is just share a few things with you guys. I think this particular discourse is pretty straightforward. What the Buddha is doing is he's taking each of these 6 things, sight, hearing, gain, training, service, and recollection or remembering things, and he's kind of casting it in a different way that you might be thinking. That oftentimes when we think about a sight or, seeing something that's pleasurable, we might think about gems, right? He's talking about these different gems or other various sights. But then he's also talking about going to see an ascetic or Brahmin, someone who is of wrong view and wrong practice, meaning that with wrong view, an individual doesn't understand Four Noble Truths. They don't understand that craving, desire, attachment is what's causing their discontentedness. And if somebody goes to see this type of individual and attempting to learn from them, what the Buddha is saying is that, yes, while you will see these things, the gems and these ascetics and Brahmins who are of wrong view and wrong practice, it doesn't actually lead to enlightenment, because he's calling this low and common and worldly, not honorable and unbeneficial, because it's not helping you to be able to progress and train your mind. The Buddha prioritizes training the mind above all other things, because that's what's going to actually lead to your peace and your joy in this life and allow you to be able to experience that ideal life where you're no longer experiencing discontentedness. And ultimately, it's going to help you to escape the cycle of rebirth as well. So going to just see a gem or seeing an ascetic or a Brahmin that doesn't have the wisdom of this path, that's not really helping you to be able to do what it is that an individual on the path to enlightenment is interested in, which is attaining enlightenment. And that's what the Buddha is saying here is the unsurpassed sight, that you go with confidence and determination, that you have this, go and see the Tathagata or a disciple of the Tathagata. The Tathagata is the Buddha himself. And now when you go to see these individuals, they're going to have the wisdom of how to purify the mind and overcome sorrow and grief, overcoming pain and sadness, so that you can gradually train the mind to eliminate that. And you can, what the Buddha is saying here is achieve the method, right? That you can achieve the method, meaning you can learn the training. And that's going to then help you to realize enlightenment. So now he goes through each one of these things, hearing, and he talks about certain sounds that are unbeneficial. But then, of course, hearing the teachings is what's going to help you to be able to get to enlightenment. There's this gain, of gaining certain material things. But then there's this gain of learning the method of getting to enlightenment, which is superior. Then there's certain training and elephantry, horsemanship, and so forth. But the Buddha is saying this is all low, right? It's worldly, including any training that you might receive from someone with wrong view or wrong practice. And then he's talking about the training with him or someone that's trained by him, that this is going to lead to enlightenment. And then he talks about service, and then ultimately he gets to recollection or remembering. So he's encouraging you here to be able to have confidence and determination to learn the actual true teachings. You need to be studying from the original words of the Buddha. You're going to see some discourses today where you're going to see that he's encouraging people to learn through investigation of his teachings and examination of his teachings through the actual words of the Buddha, not through people who have wrong view or wrong practice. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So we'll move to the next one, which is chapter 22. Is there someone who would like to read this? Nobody's interested in reading? Okay. Well, I think what I'm going to do then is just in class so that we can just move on. If you guys would like to study today, we can study. But if not, I'm just going to end class. All right. I don't see anybody. Let's see. Alicia, I am trying to raise my hand, but I don't know. Oh, okay. Let's see. I'll go ahead and click on this, Alicia, and then you should be able to unmute yourself. There you
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Demonstration of confidence in own and in one endowed with confidence. This is the time for it, fortunate one. This is the time for it. Fortunate one. The perfectly enlightened one should explain the demonstration of confidence. Now I will find out whether or not this monk exhibits the demonstration of confidence. Then listen, subiti, and attend closely. I will speak. Here, subiti, a monk, is virtuous, practicing moral conduct. He resides restrained by the training guidelines, possessed of good conduct and wise decision-making, seeing danger in the slightest fault. Having undertaken the training guidelines, he trains in them. This is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, a monk has learned much, remembers what he has learned, and accumulates what he has learned. Those teachings that are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing, which proclaim the perfectly complete and pure spiritual life, such teachings as this he has learned much of, retained in mind, recited verbally, mentally investigated, and penetrate well by view. This, too, is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, a monk has wholesome friends, wholesome companions, wholesome comrades. This, too, is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, a monk is easy to correct and possesses qualities that make him easy to correct. He is patient and receives instruction respectfully. This, too, is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, a monk is peaceful and diligent in attending to this diverse course that are to be done with his fellow monks. He possesses sound ability to make decisions about them in order to carry out and arrange them properly. This, too, is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, a monk adores the teachings and is pleasing in his statements, filled with significant joy in regard to the teaching and discipline. This, too, is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, a monk has aroused energy for abandoning unwholesome qualities and acquiring wholesome qualities. He is strong, firm in effort, not casting off the duty of cultivating wholesome qualities. This, too, is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, a monk gains at will, without trouble and difficulty, the four jhanas that constitutes the higher mind and are peaceful dwellings in this very life. This, too, is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, a monk remembers his countless past lives, that is, 1 birth, 2 births, 3 births, 4 births, 5 births, 10 births, 20 births, 30 births, 40 births, 15 births, 100 births, 1,000 births, 100,000 births, many aeons of world dissolution, many aeons of world evolution, many aeons of world dissolution and world evolution. Thus, there I was so named, of such a clan, with such an appearance, such was my food, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such my lifespan. Passing away from there, I was reborn elsewhere, and there too I was so named, of such a clan, with such an appearance, such was my food, such my experience of pleasure and pain, such my lifespan. Passing away from there, I was reborn here. Thus, he remembers his countless past lives with their aspects and details. This, too, is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, with the divine eye, third eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, a monk sees beings passing away and being reborn, and wholesome, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and he understands how beings are in accordance with the karma. Thus, these beings who engage in misconduct by body, speech, and mind, who abusively criticize the noble ones, held wrong view, and undertook unwholesome karma based on wrong view, with the breakup of the body after death, have been reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower world, in hell. But these beings who engage in wholesome conduct by body, speech, and mind, who did not abusively criticize the noble ones, who held right and undertook wholesome karma based on right view, with the breakup of the body after death, have been reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world. Thus, with the divine eye, third eyes, which is purified and surpasses the human, he sees beings passing away and being reborn, and wholesome, beautiful and ugly, fortunate and unfortunate, and he understands how beings fare in accordance with the karma. This too is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence. Again, with the destruction of the tens, a monk has realized for himself with direct knowledge, experience, in this very life, the tentless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, and having entered upon it, he resides in it. This too is a demonstration of confidence in one endowed with confidence.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So one of the pollutions of the mind, one of the 10 fetters that the Buddha discovered, and this is hindering an individual from being able to get to enlightenment, is doubt. What doubt is doing is it's causing the mind to doubt and have a lack of confidence for the Buddha, the teachings, the community that you're part of, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. And as long as you have doubt in your mind, you won't be able to get even to the first stage of enlightenment, let alone to enlightenment itself. Looks like I lost Zoom. Let me wait for Zoom to come back. Sorry if there's people online through the live stream. Looks like Zoom is bouncing. Okay, sorry about that, guys. It looks like my Wi-Fi was going down and bouncing around. So I'm going to just start from the beginning where I started to talk about this topic of this particular chapter 22. So one of the pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind is called doubt, where the mind is going to have doubt or lack confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community that you're part of, your teacher, or your own ability to get to enlightenment. And as long as you have doubt, you can't get to the first stage of enlightenment, let alone enlightenment itself, because the mind is doubting whether or not any of these things are true, and it hasn't really done the work to investigate the teachings, to be able to know that the teachings are true, and to be able to practice them and see the improvement to the condition of your mind. Because the way that you eliminate doubt is not through blind belief or faith or anything like that, but instead you investigate and examine the teachings. and then you reflect on them to independently verify them, and then you practice them. And as you're practicing the teachings and you're seeing the improvement to the condition of your mind in your life, you eventually get to a point where there's no longer any doubt in your mind about these teachings because you've seen too much improvement by that point. Your mind won't be enlightened by the time you eliminate doubt, but you would have at least gotten to a certain point where you've seen significant improvement in the mind. So in order to get to the elimination of doubt, you're going to need to have confidence. And you gain that confidence over time. And the Buddha is talking about some of the things that lead to an individual gaining confidence here. And he's going one by one to help you to be able to see that, because you're going to need confidence and you'll gradually be able to cultivate that, like I mentioned, through investigation and examination of the teachings, through reflecting on them to independently verify that they're true, and then practicing them, uprooting the pollutions out of your mind and seeing the improvement. So here he's saying this is the way that an individual is developing confidence, that if they've developed their moral conduct and they're restraining their mind based on the Eightfold Path, which is the training guidelines, they're possessed of this good moral conduct, making wise decisions and seeing danger in their slightest missteps. Well, this is because an individual is trained in the Eightfold Path. They understand the natural law of karma. They see it very clearly, and they're seeing this danger in the slightest faults. And because of this, in their training in these teachings, they have a certain amount of confidence in the teachings because they're now training in these teachings and making some improvements, right? And that's a certain level of confidence. But then an individual continues to grow and develop from there, and now they experience more confidence through the things that the Buddha is talking about here, right? And these are all very self-explanatory. We could go one by one, but I'm just going to ultimately let you guys ask questions about any of these that you like. I'll touch on a couple of them, but just let me know if you have questions on them. Like this one here, having wholesome friends, wholesome companions, and wholesome comrades. This is one of the things that the Buddha teaches you, that it's unwise to associate with unwholesome individuals, and that part of the path to enlightenment and getting to enlightenment is to make sure that you're producing wholesome friends and wholesome companions, wholesome comrades, that you're making decisions to move in that direction. And he teaches that as part of the training and a priority on the path to enlightenment. So if an individual is doing that, then they have a certain amount of confidence in the Buddha and the teachings, in the community as well, because that's typically where a lot of your friends are going to come from, is the community of practitioners that you're learning and growing with, because those people are into wholesome things. This one here, number 4, where an individual, a student, is easy to correct, right? That they patiently receive instruction from a teacher, and they do that respectfully, because it's really hard for the unenlightened mind to be able to hear advice and guidance from anybody, including their teacher, even if they've made a choice to become a student of a particular teacher to help them get to enlightenment. Oftentimes the ego is in there. And then you also have personal existence view, which is part of that ego, where you're wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. So when a teacher starts providing guidance to be able to help a student to be able to see their unwise decisions and how to make wise decisions to produce wholesome results, a student will sometimes reject and push away a teacher because their ego is in there. They're wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way based on the personal existence view. They have conceit or arrogance or pride, thinking that they're so great and they're so wonderful, and they don't want to hear this idea that they're doing something unwise. But in order to be able to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to hear from your teacher. Here are some areas that you need to improve. Here are some areas that you need help in. And now here's some things that you're making unwise decisions. But a student sometimes, even after studying for multiple years, can sometimes push that away. And they're not going to be able to experience enlightenment as long as they're doing that. But if somebody does receive their guidance from their teacher, and they do that patiently, and they do it respectfully, then there's a certain amount of confidence in that teacher. And that is the demonstration of confidence. That's what the Buddha is saying. So again, we can go through each one of these individually, but here I'm just going to kind of jump down to a couple of these. Here, the Buddha is talking about gaining the jhanas, right? The jhanas are the 4 preliminary phases that the mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment, where there's enhanced qualities of mind. And when you're experiencing those enhanced qualities of mind, that's going to help you to build confidence, because you're going to know these teachings are improving the mind, because you see it in your mind moving through these jhanas. And then ultimately what the Buddha gets to down here is he talks about actually getting to enlightenment. Of course, by the time someone gets to enlightenment, it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. They haven't had any discontentedness whatsoever. They're going to have a massive amount of confidence in the Buddha because they know these teachings lead exactly where he said they do, to this enlightened mental state. So there's multiple things here that the Buddha is helping you to be able to see how to build this confidence, because that's what you would like to do. And he's going all the way from kind of the lowest level, the lowest bar, and then going higher and higher and higher and helping you to increase your confidence, because you're going to need that as you're progressing on the path, because it can be really challenging. There's times where you're eliminating certain cravings, desires, attachments in your mind, where you used to get these pleasant feelings from these certain things. And when you're letting them go, it can be very painful for the mind. You're going to need to walk through painful feelings in order to get to the peace and joy that is enlightenment. Because these cravings where you're getting pleasant feelings and your mind's holding on, as you start letting those cravings go, your mind's going to get painful feelings and it's going to hurt. And you're going to need to walk through that in order to be able to get to the peace and joy. The way that I describe it is walking through the fire to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. Or one of the ways I talk about it is it's like getting out of the mafia. When you join the mafia, you get all these friends, you get new ways to make money, you get all this protection and so forth. And wow, you get all these pleasant feelings. But if you try to leave the mafia, it's going to be very painful for you, right? So walking out of the mafia is very painful, and walking away from these cravings, desires, attachments is very painful. So you're going to need this confidence in order to see you through all of that, so that you can continue to grow and continue to develop, understanding you're headed in the right direction, even though you're experiencing those painful feelings. And that's an indication that your mind is letting go of these cravings, because now you're walking through the fire. But while you're in the fire, it can be very challenging for the mind. And oftentimes people turn away from the path to enlightenment. They push it away. The very things that led to them coming to the path to enlightenment, which is craving, desire, attachment, which has been causing them all these discontent feelings, those same cravings will have them turn away from the path to enlightenment, because as they're experiencing the painful feelings, they oftentimes will push away. So here the Buddha is helping you to be able to see how to build that confidence, because you're going to need that confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. And you may not have that right now, and that's okay. But this is a discourse that shows you how to build that confidence. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, it looks like Alberto has a question. And Alberto, maybe after you're done, you could use Messenger to help Alicia to know how to raise your hand, because you know how to electronically raise your hand.
Okay. I have one question. What does the Buddha refer to exactly by the third eye? Because I heard about the third eye from other schools of thought, but I don't know exactly what it is. Is that the wisdom, or what is it?
Yeah, so the third eye, or the divine eye, or some people call it the inward looking eye, or the introspective eye. What this is where you fully develop your mindfulness and you're able to look inward and you're able to see the entire mind. This occurs in the second jhana, where you now have full awareness of the entire mind. Because prior to the second jhana, you have a conscious mind and you have a subconscious mind. And you're not aware of the subconscious mind. But the subconscious mind is actually more polluted than the conscious mind. But by the time you get to that second jhana, you have what's called unification of the mind, or oneness of mind, where you can now see the entire mind. You have this inward looking ability, this introspection. You have this mindfulness or awareness of the mind. And it's referred to as opening of the third eye, or the divine eye, or the inward looking eye, because you're able to look inward and see the entire mind, where there's nothing hiding in the corners, so to speak. So that's what it means to open the third eye, is to have developed your mindfulness to a certain degree that you have this deep introspection and you can look inward and be really reflective to see what's going on within your own mind.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else. So we'll go to this chapter 23. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Alberto, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I can read since I'm already here. The perfectly enlightened one taught monks to eat at a single session. On one occasion, the perfectly enlightened one taught the monks the benefits of eating in a single session, that one will be free from illness and affliction and will enjoy lightness, strength, and a comfortable residing. But Dati told the perfectly enlightened one that he was not willing to do so. Then the perfectly enlightened one agreed to allow Badati to keep the food for the next meal. Again, Badati told the perfectly enlightened one he was not willing to do that either. Then the Venerable Badati did not present himself to the perfectly enlightened one for a whole of 3-month period, until the robe-making period where monks said to Badati that his action was inappropriate. Badati then went to see the perfectly enlightened one. Venerable Sir, a wrongdoing overcame me, in that like an unwise person, confused and blundering, when a training precept was being made known by the perfectly enlightened one. When the community of monks was undertaking the training, I declared my refusal to observe your teaching. Venerable Sir, may the perfectly enlightened one forgive my wrongdoing, seen as such for the sake of restraint in the future. Surely, Badati, of wrongdoing overcame you, in that like an unwise person, confused and blundering, when a training precept was being made known by me. When the community of monks was undertaking the training, you declared your refusal to practice this teaching. When do you think, Badati? Suppose a monk here were one liberated in both ways, and I told him, "Come, monk, be a plank for me across the mud." Would he walk across himself? Would he dispose his body otherwise? Or would he say no? No, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Badati? Suppose a monk here were one liberated by wisdom, a body witness, one attained to view, one liberated by confidence, a teaching follower, a confidence follower. I told him, "Come, monk, be a plank for me across the mud." Would he walk across himself, or would he dispose his body otherwise, or would he say no? No, Venerable Sir. What do you think, Badati? Were you on that occasion one liberated in both ways, or one liberated by wisdom, or a body witness, or one attained to view, or one liberated by confidence, or a teaching's follower, or a confidence follower? No, Venerable Sir. Badati, on that occasion, were you not empty, unwise, and mistaken? Yes, Venerable Sir. Venerable Sir, a wrongdoing came to me in that like an unwise person, confused and blundering, when a training precept was being made known by the perfectly enlightened one. When the community of monks were undertaking the training, I declared my refusal to practice this teaching. Venerable Sir, may the perfectly enlightened one forgive my wrongdoing sin as such for the sake of restraint in the future. Surely, Badati, a wrongdoing overcame you, in that like an unwise person, confused and blundering, when a training precept was made known by me. When the community of monks was undertaking the training, you declared your refusal to practice this teaching. But since you see your wrongdoing as such and make apologies in accordance with the teachings, we understand you. For it is growth in the noble one's disciple when one sees one's wrongdoing as such and makes apologies in accordance with the teachings by undertaking restraint for the future.
Okay, thank you, Alberto. So here, what was happening is the Buddha had shared a teaching to only eat one meal per day. And the reason why he was doing this with the ordained practitioners is to be able to help them to eliminate sensual desire. Because sometimes what the mind will do in the unenlightened state when it has sensual desire, meaning longing, yearning through the sense bases, like the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself, is that when you're experiencing discontent feelings like painful feelings of sadness, anger, grief, or sorrow, you might use food having a certain flavor touch the tongue to be able to get to pleasant feelings, right? That's those conditioned pleasant feelings. So someone might be sad and they eat a whole bunch of ice cream or brownies or cake in order to get to conditioned pleasant feelings. And in this situation, they haven't actually solved their problem, because the reason why they're in the painful feelings to begin with is because of craving, desire, attachment. And now they're using a craving, desire, attachment for food to be able to get to the pleasant feelings, which those are conditional as well. And now when those conditioned pleasant feelings are gone, now their mind's going to end up right back into the painful feelings. So eating and using food in order to get to something that feels somewhat comfortable is really unwise, because these painful feelings feel uncomfortable for the individual. But for the untrained mind that lacks wisdom, the only way it knows how to get back to something that's somewhat comfortable is to crave something and now get to something that's pleasurable. This is why after a hard day at work, someone might come home and have alcohol, or they might have sex, or they might gamble, or they might go shopping, or something of this nature. This is what happens when the unwise mind is experiencing painful feelings. The only thing it knows how to do is turn to a craving to get to pleasant feelings. So the Buddha taught to eat one meal a day, so that way, if you're eating essentially at the same time every day, that no matter what's happening throughout your day, you're not actually eating based in emotion. And he would teach them to eat prior to midday. He also taught them to do this because it's less impactful to the body, that the body doesn't have to work so hard to digest. And that's why he's talking here that an individual can be free of illness and affliction. Nowadays, you're going to need more than one meal, particularly in the household life. You're not going to be able to eat just one meal every single day and sustain the body on just one meal. So you're going to need multiple meals. But what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to eliminate eating the food based in emotion, or you're just craving to get to pleasant feelings. You're going to need to learn how to eat all foods and just see it as something that sustains the health of the body, not something to please the tongue and please the mind. And you're going to need to learn how to eat in moderation, where you're not gorging in your food. And if you're able to do these things, which takes you time to be able to do this, then you'll be able to accomplish the same thing, which is eliminating sensual desire based in food. And here's an individual that was learning to eat at one time a day, which during the lifetime of the Buddha, as an ordained practitioner, they could do that because they were just basically sitting around, walking, talking. They didn't have any real hard work, that it was other people that were doing those kinds of things, like the heavy lifting and stuff like that. So they could eat one meal a day. So the Buddha was teaching them to eat just one meal a day. And some people even say that during the lifetime of the Buddha, maybe food had a higher caloric value, like more calories, because like maybe a broccoli grown 2,500 years ago might have had more calories than a broccoli we grow today, based on the pollution of the planet and the earth and the environment. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, because I have no way of testing that. But that could be another theory why one meal was able to sustain the health of their body. But nonetheless, if you understand what you're working towards, which is eliminating sensual desire, now you understand that not eat based in emotion, right? Eat in moderation, and when you're eating, to eat based on sustaining the health of the body, not just because you like these foods and I dislike these foods, and you're going to try to push those away. You're going to need to get to the point where you're able to eat any and all foods. So when the Buddha was teaching, this particular ordained practitioner sounds like they got a little bit grumpy, a little bit irritable. They didn't want to learn the teaching. They went away from the Buddha for 3 months and kind of sulked. We call that sulking, right? Where they're kind of grumpy and irritable and just kind of leaving away from the Buddha. But this individual eventually came around, and then they went and talked to the Buddha and they apologized. And of course, the Buddha is not upset. The Buddha is not angry that the student experienced this, but he just said, okay, this is, something that you can learn from, that you can learn from this precept. You can learn that it's unwise to just reject a teaching just for the sake of rejecting a teaching. But then the Buddha goes into this talk where he says, what do you think if I asked somebody to lay down as a plank for me across the mud? Would they do that? Would they lay down across the mud? And of course, this individual says, no, they wouldn't do that. And he talks about someone who's liberated. He's actually talking about someone who's enlightened or close to it. He's talking about someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment as well. And he says, even somebody who's enlightened or in the first stage of enlightenment, would they lay down in the mud and make themselves a plank? And of course, the answer is no. And what the Buddha is essentially getting to is that he wouldn't ask somebody to lay down in the mud and make a plank for him. He would only give you a teaching or give you guidance if it was going to enhance the quality of your mind and enhance the quality of your life. He's not going to give you some kind of guidance like laying down on the mud and making a plank. Instead, he's giving you real, true guidance that's actually going to truly lead to enlightenment and to liberation. So this is going together with the previous chapter about having confidence in the Buddha, the teachings, the community, your teacher, and your own ability to get to enlightenment. If you lack confidence, when a teacher is sharing a teaching, It'll be like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to practice that particular teaching. Well, fine. If that's what you choose, that's your choice. You're just not going to get to enlightenment. But the Buddha is helping this student to see like, hey, he's not going to teach him anything that's unwise. He's only teaching him how to get to enlightenment, essentially. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular teaching. This is chapter 23 of volume 12. And it looks like Alicia has a question, figured out how to raise your hand. Thank you, Alberto.
Yes, I do now. Thank you, Alberto. I do have a question about, like, what about if someone is practicing generosity by proposing, for example, a chocolate cake to me? And if I want to practice to not eat based on my craving, because I do like the taste of chocolate cake, and it's something that I cannot, for example, take away and give it to someone else, what would be the wisest thing to do here?
I would do what you said initially, which is accept the offering and then give it to somebody else. That's what I would do. If somebody was making you an offering and you had nobody else to give it to, then you can determine that and figure that out and then just throw it away if that's what you need to do. Because the beneficial thing here is that it's enhancing the quality of the mind of the person that they're making this offering, they're making this gift. But you don't know when you're accepting the gift that you're not going to have anybody to give it to, because a piece of chocolate cake, it'll last for 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And I'm sure you'll come in contact with someone during that period of time. So you don't necessarily know that you don't have anyone to give it to. But I would accept it if I was you, because then it's enhancing the quality of that person's mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere else. So now I'm going to move on to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read chapter 24? This is a short one. Okay, Alicia, go ahead, ma'am.
The noble disciples will not transgress the training guidelines even for life's sake. Just as Ba'arada, the great ocean, is stable and does not overflow its boundaries, so too, when I have prescribed a training guideline for the disciples, they will not do wrong even for life's sake. This is the second astounding and amazing quality that the monks see in this teaching and discipline, because of which they are pleased in it. Here quoted only one of the 8 astounding and amazing qualities that the monks see in this teaching and discipline.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here the Buddha is saying that, hey, once you understand the teachings, right, someone who's a noble disciple, someone who's practicing the teachings closely, that even if your life was at stake and you would potentially physically die, you would not stop practicing these teachings. So for example, if someone held a gun to your head and said, here, drink this alcohol or take this cocaine, if you understand the teachings and you have seen the clear cause and effect of the natural law of karma, the Buddha is saying that, hey, you would, even for life's sake, meaning that if you lost your life, you still wouldn't break the training, because you understand the cause and effect relationship of taking that cocaine or taking that alcohol or whatever it is, that you understand how detrimental that is. It's like putting poison into the body, and you wouldn't be interested in doing that. So for someone who studied deeply, they are not going to have a misstep or choose to do the opposite of the teachings, even if their life was dependent on it. And that's for someone who studied deeply and be able to see the teachings very clear. It's not that the Buddha is telling you to do this. It's that once you have deeply studied and you've trained the mind and you've seen the results of the teachings and you see very clearly the wisdom of them and you've seen the transformation of your mind, there's no situation where you would not practice the teachings, because you understand them so well and you've seen the beneficial results and the improvements and how these teachings truly work with the natural law of karma. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions. Oh, Alicia might have a question there. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm just wondering, isn't going against the self-compassion?
So your compassion, which is concern for your misfortune, is that you wouldn't make any decisions yourself that's going to harm any other beings. So in that situation, if you were to take heroin or cocaine, you're actually causing harm to this body. But if this other person's choosing to pull a trigger and shoot you, that's their decision. That's not your decision. They're the ones who are choosing to do that. So if you chose to ingest that cocaine or that heroin or something like that, that's your choice that is now leading to the unwholesome results. So this person's choice that chooses to shoot you or kill you because of not taking the heroin or cocaine, that's not a choice that you're making. You're just choosing to stick with the training because you understand how impactful this is and what it all leads to based on the natural law.
Okay.
So it would be a lack of compassion to actually cause harm to this body through ingesting something like heroin or cocaine. And the idea of you being in that situation is very unlikely, right? There's nobody that's going to put a gun to your head and say, here, snort this cocaine and take this heroin, right? But I just use that as an example.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Another example might be, Alicia, like, if it was a matter of stealing something, right? Like you were maybe at your friend's house and you saw a bunch of money sitting on the table. And let's just say it was like $1 million. You would look at that and be like, yeah, I'm not interested in stealing it, right? I'm not interested in that. And the idea of someone having $1 million on their table, that's pretty rare too. But this might be like a little bit more in line with what you might experience, something like that, where you wouldn't steal, you wouldn't have sexual misconduct, you wouldn't do all these other things that the Buddha teaches that it would be unwise to do because you've seen the results so clearly. Okay, so now we'll go to chapter 25. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Janae, go ahead, ma'am.
4 defilements of ascetics and Brahmins. So to monks, there are 4 defilements of ascetics and Brahmins, because of which some ascetics and Brahmins do not shine, blaze, and radiate. What for? There are some ascetics and Brahmins who drink liquor and wine and do not refrain from drinking liquor and wine and ingest substances that cause heedlessness. This is the first defilement of ascetics and Brahmins, because of which some ascetics and Brahmins do not shine, blaze, and radiate. There are some ascetics and Brahmins who indulge in sexual intercourse and do not refrain from sexual intercourse. This is the second defilement of ascetics and Brahmins, because of which some ascetics and Brahmins do not shine, blaze, and radiate. There are some ascetics and Brahmins who accept gold and silver and do not refrain from accepting gold and silver. This is the third defilement of ascetics and Brahmins, because of which some ascetics and Brahmins do not shine, blaze, and radiate. There are some ascetics and Brahmins who earn their living by wrong livelihood and do not refrain from wrong livelihood. This is the fourth defilement of ascetics and Brahmins, because of which some ascetics and Brahmins do not shine, blaze, and radiate. These are the 4 defilements of ascetics and Brahmins, because of which some ascetics and Brahmins do not shine, blaze, and radiate.
Okay, thank you, Janae. So remember, during the lifetime of the Buddha, there were many people who were teaching. It wasn't just him. And there were many different students that were learning with different teachers. The Buddha was teaching what it took to get to enlightenment, and he knew how exactly to get to enlightenment because he had done it. And he was sharing with his students how to do that. And people were figuring that out as part of his teachings. But there were other teachers and there were other ascetics and Brahmin. Ascetics are just someone who's given up worldly possessions and entered into a life of homelessness and attempting to get to enlightenment. That's one way to do that. You can also do it from a household life as well. But those ascetics might have been studying with other teachers. And then Brahmins are like Hindu priests, that they're also not really on the path to enlightenment. So there's these other individuals that the Buddha is referring to as like, hey, they're not shining, they're not radiant, they're not blazing, meaning they don't look bright and vibrant and cheerful. And there's these 4 reasons that are all based in craving, anger, and ignorance, the pollutions of mind of why this is occurring. He's talking about the moral conduct, and sometimes you see that, right, that the Buddha is talking about the moral conduct here. But underneath of all of that is the pollutions that are motivating it. That's the reason why the individual doesn't shine, blaze, or radiate, because their mind is polluted. So if an individual is taking substances that cause heedlessness, they have a certain amount of craving, they have a certain amount of ill will or anger towards this being, that they're putting poison into the body. And there's a certain amount of ignorance or unknowing of true reality, a lack of wisdom, right? So that's what's causing the mind to not shine, blaze, or radiate. And then the same thing with sexual intercourse, that as long as an individual is having sexual intercourse, there's going to be a certain amount of craving in the mind, and there's a certain amount of anger in the mind, because when the mind's getting what it wants, it's going to be happy and pleased, but when it's not getting what it wants, it's going to be angry and frustrated. And then there's a certain amount of ignorance or unknowing of true reality in the mind, and that's going to hinder an individual from shining, blazing, or radiating. Then there's accepting gold and silver. During the lifetime of the Buddha, he didn't accept any kind of currency. That was the currency at the time. He didn't accept land. He didn't accept animals. He didn't accept gold and silver because he was living right alongside of his students, and he was living in their house, and they could provide him food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. Where today, teachers will accept currency because they're not always with their students and they need to purchase things. But the underlying thing that's going on here is an individual can be craving money, right? So even if a teacher or an ordained practitioner is accepting money nowadays, which people do, they need to still train their mind to not have craving and longing and yearning for that money, because it's going to produce discontentedness. So that action of being being attached to the money is what's causing the mind to not shine, blaze, and radiate. And then if somebody has wrong livelihood, that means they're scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, pursuing gain with gain, which we talked about in our last class, or they're maybe having business in weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, or poisons. This is all going to lead also to not shining, blazing, and radiating, because there's a certain amount of craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind. So it's the pollutions of mind that are motivating this conduct. And that's what the Buddha is focusing on, is he's talking about the conduct, but you always need to look what's underneath of that, which is the pollutions that are motivating that. And that's why the mind and the individual isn't shining, blazing, and radiating. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask questions if you like. All right, I'm not seeing questions anywhere. So we'll move to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Chapter 26. Okay, Alberto, go ahead, sir.
Okay. Unwholesome habits. What are unwholesome habits? They are unwholesome bodily actions, unwholesome verbal actions, and evil, unwholesome livelihood. These are called unwholesome habits. And what do these unwholesome habits originate from? Their origin is stated. They should be said to originate from the mind. What mind? Thought mind is multiple. Though mind is multiple, varied, and of different aspects, there is mind affected by craving, greed, by anger, hatred, and by ignorance, delusion, and knowing of true reality. Unwholesome habits originate from these. And where do these unwholesome habits cease without remainder? Their elimination is stated. Here a monk abandons bodily misconduct and develops wholesome bodily conduct. He abandons verbal misconduct and develops wholesome verbal conduct. He abandons mental misconduct and develops wholesome mental conduct. He abandons wrongdoing livelihood and gains a living by right livelihood. It is here that unwholesome habits cease without remainder. And how practicing does he practice the way to the elimination of unwholesome habits? Here, a monk awakens enthusiasm for the non-arising of unarising evil, unwholesome states, and he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind, and strives. He awakens enthusiasm for the abandonment of arising evil, unwholesome states. He awakens enthusiasm for the arising of unarising wholesome states. He awakens enthusiasm for the continuation, non-disappearance, strengthening, increase, and fulfillment by development of arising wholesome states. And he makes effort, arouses energy, exerts his mind, and strives. One so practicing practices the way to the elimination of unwholesome habits.
Okay, thank you, Alberto. So this helps you to be able to see what the Buddha is talking about in terms of the moral conduct, how the underlying aspect of that is all in the mind, which is what I was just talking about, right? So what are unwholesome habits? They are unwholesome bodily actions, unwholesome verbal actions, and unwholesome livelihoods. Okay, livelihood is how you choose to sustain your life. And if you're making unwise decisions about your bodily actions, verbal actions, or unwholesome livelihood, then those are the actions that you're choosing, right? And where are those choices coming from? They originate in the mind, right? Everything's coming from the mind. The mind is the CPU, where the body is just following along, right? The mind is the real central processing unit of this entire being. Well, what is it in the mind that's causing these unwholesome habits to occur? Well, that's what the craving, anger, and ignorance is motivating. Those pollutions of mind is what's motivating that unwholesome conduct. Well, how do you get rid of this unwholesome habits where they can cease without remainder? Well, you need to abandon the bodily misconduct, the verbal misconduct, and so forth and so on. You need to develop the wholesomeness where you have wholesome bodily conduct, wholesome verbal conduct, wholesome mental conduct, and then you have a wholesome right livelihood, right? So this is where you can now eliminate all of those unwholesome habits. Well, how do you do that? Well, the way you do it is through applying right effort. That's what the Buddha is talking about here, that when you have this unwholesome states that are not currently in your mind, you need to apply effort with enthusiasm to arouse this energy, and you exert your mind and you strive to prevent any unwholesome qualities from coming into the mind. Then any unwholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, you need to apply the effort to eliminate those out of the mind. Any wholesome qualities that are not currently in your mind, you're going to need to apply the effort to bring those into the mind. And any wholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, you're going to need to support those and encourage those and not allowing them to fade. So it's right effort that's ultimately going to allow you to eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance, and then improve your conduct. Because whenever you have unwholesome bodily, verbal, or mental conduct, and you're practicing or you're practicing wrong livelihood, this is causing harm in the world. And now this harm is going to come back to you because of the natural law of karma. So how can you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life as long as you're making unwise decisions about your conduct and the way you interact in the world? So you need to apply the effort to eliminate the unwholesome and bring in the wholesome. And that's where your mindfulness and awareness of mind comes in, that you need to be aware of these unwholesome qualities arising. So having the wisdom of craving, anger, and ignorance, and all the other aspects of the teachings of the Buddha, you can see those unwholesome qualities arising. And now you can apply effort and energy to strive to eliminate those unwholesome qualities. And now when you understand the wholesome qualities, you can arise the generosity, the loving kindness, and the wisdom through applying the effort to do that. And that's what's ultimately going to transform the way you interact with others in the world. And that's going to change what you experience on a day-to-day basis because of the natural law of karma, of cause and effect. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's go to the next chapter. Is there someone who'd like to read chapter 27? Okay, Janae, go ahead, ma'am.
Words which should be studied, learned, and investigated in the foremost assembly. What is the assembly trained in investigation, not in conceited talk? Here, in this kind of assembly, when these discourses that are being recited that are mere poetry composed by poets, beautiful in words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by their disciples, the monks are not interested to listen to them. Do not lend an ear to them or apply their minds to understand them. They do not think these teachings should be studied and learned. When these discourses spoken by the Tathagata are being recited in that deep in meaning, world transcending, connected with emptiness, the monks are interested to listen to them, lend an ear to them, and apply their minds to understand them. They think those teachings should be studied and learned. And having learned those teachings, they question each other about them and investigate them thoroughly, asking, how is this? What is the meaning of this? They disclose to others what is obscure and clarifying what is unclear, and dispel their confusion about numerous misunderstandings. This is called the assembly trained in investigation, not in conceited talk. And what is the assembly trained in? And what is the assembly trained in conceited talk, not in investigation? Here in this kind of assembly, those discourses are being spoken by the Tathagata, are being recited that are deep in meaning, world transcending, connected with emptiness. The monks are not interested, do not understand them, to listen to them. Do not lend an ear to them or apply their minds to understand them. They do not think those teachings should be studied and learned. But when those discourses are being recited that are mere poetry composed by poets, beautiful in their words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by their disciples, they are interested to listen to them, lend an ear to them, and apply their minds to understand them. They think those teachings should be studied and learned, and having learned those teachings, they do not question each other about them or investigate them thoroughly, asking, how is this? What is the meaning of this? They do not disclose to others what is obscure and clarifying what is unclear or dispelling their confusion about numerous misunderstandings. This is called the assembly trained in conceited talk, not in investigation. These monks are the two kinds of assemblies. Of these two kinds of assemblies, the assembly trained in investigation, not in conceited talk, is foremost.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So the Buddha is talking about these two different types of communities or assemblies, because he would go around from town to town and he would teach in different places. So there'd be different groups of people that would, collect together. And he's talking about this group of people or this community that is trained in investigation and investigating, examining the teachings. And they're not trained in conceited talk, like arrogant and prideful talk. And he's saying in those types of communities, when there's just mere poetry being recited, kind of beautiful in words and phrases, easy on the ear, so to speak, right? That the people who are trained in investigation, not in conceited talk, they're not interested in listening to those teachings because essentially they don't lead to enlightenment. But when the discourses are taught by the Tathagata, by the Buddha, those individuals are interested in listening to him and they investigate those teachings and they try to figure out, what is this and what's the meaning of that? And then they also disclose that to other people as people are asking questions, and they dispel their confusion and any kind of misunderstandings. And that's what's actually going to lead to enlightenment. But then there's other communities that are trained in conceited talk, not in investigation. So now when the Buddha is teaching his teachings, those types of communities, those types of groups of people, they're not interested in listening to those teachings because they're really hard for those people, because those people are interested in listening to beautiful words and phrases and hearing all this poetry, right? They want something that's easy on the ears. The teachings of the Buddha, they're challenging to be able to understand. It's not easy, but it's not difficult either. It's challenging to wrap your mind around and think about these teachings. It's not something you just sit back, put your legs up and just let it kind of brush over you like the wind or like a wave. Instead, you need to really penetrate into the wisdom that the Buddha is teaching you. And it's very challenging for the mind to do that work to understand it. And oftentimes the mind wants to push that away and it doesn't want to really do the work to investigate. The mind's complacent. It's holding on to all these central desires and it doesn't want to let go and even spend the time to even try to listen to the teachings. It would rather hear this poetry that's easy on the ears. But unfortunately, that type of community is not going to be able to get to enlightenment. So that's why the Buddha says of these two kinds of assemblies, the one that's trained in investigation, not in conceited talk, that is foremost, because those individuals are actually going to be able to cultivate the wisdom that they need in order to be able to get to enlightenment. If you're just listening to podcasts or teachers or videos or reading books that are just easy on the ears, it's not actually teaching you the true path to enlightenment through the original words of the Buddha, you're not going to get to enlightenment that way. You need to be able to have good quality, reliable translations that you can understand are the actual words of the Buddha. And then you don't believe those. You investigate and examine them, reflect on them to verify them, and then you practice them. And that's what's going to actually transform the mind, uprooting these pollutions so that you can experience more and more liberation of the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here. And of course, you can decide what type of assembly or what type of community you would like to be part of, right? And then find that group of people and train in that way. So let me know what questions you guys have. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So we're going to move to the next chapter, which is chapter 28. Would somebody like to read this? Okay, Yihang, go ahead, ma'am. We might stop a couple of times along the way because this has got a lot of discourses together, but I'll just let you know, Yihang, if we need to stop anywhere.
Okay, cool. Why every practitioner should study the Tathagata's words which should be studied, learned, and investigated in the foremost assembly. Here, in this kind of assembly, when those discourses are being recited that are mere poetry, composed by poets, beautiful in words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by their disciples, the monks do not want to listen to them, do not lend an ear to them, or apply their minds to understand them. They do not think those teachings should be studied and learned. But when those discourses spoken by the Tathagata are being recited that are deep in meaning, word transcending, connected with emptiness, the monks want to listen to them, lend an ear to them, and apply their minds to understand them. They think those teachings should be studied and learned. And having learned those teachings, they question each other about them and investigate them thoroughly, asking, how is this? What is the meaning of this? They disclose to others what is obscure and clarify what is unclear, and dispel their confusion about numerous misunderstandings. This is called the assembly trend in investigation, not in conceited talk. Words that should be studied and mastered. Monks, once in the past, the Dasarahas had a kettle drum called the summoner. When the summoner became cracked and the Dasarahas inserted another peg, eventually the time came when the summoner's original drum head had disappeared and only a collection of pegs remained. So too, monks. The same thing will happen with the monks in the future. When those discourses spoken by the Tathagata that are deep in the meaning, word transcending, dealing with emptiness are being recited, they will not be eager to listen to them, nor lend an ear to them, nor apply their minds to understand them, and they will not think those teachings should be studied and mastered. But when those discourses that are mere poetry, composed by poets, beautiful in words and phrases, created by outsiders, spoken by their disciples, are being recited, they will be eager to listen to them, will lend an ear to them, will apply their minds to understand them, and they will think those teachings should be studied and mastered. In this way, monks, those discourses spoken by the Tathagata that are deep in the meaning, word transcending, dealing with emptiness, will disappear. Therefore, monks, you should train yourselves thus. With those discourses spoken by the Tathagata that are deep in meaning, word transcending, dealing with emptiness, are being recited, we will be eager to listen to them, will lend an ear to them, will apply our minds to understand them, and we will think those teachings should be studied and mastered. Thus should you train yourselves.
Okay, let's talk about this one for a second. So here the Buddha is giving an analogy of this drum, which is made out of wood. And then whenever there's a crack in the wood, they put another wooden peg into the top of the drum. And over time, as each one of these cracks appear and they put a wooden peg into it, eventually all the original wood of the drum is gone and all you've got left is a collection of pegs. And the Buddha is saying the same thing is true with his teachings, that eventually people aren't going to be learning with his original words and they're going to essentially be replacing it with things that aren't his teachings. And then as part of that, his teachings are actually going to disappear. And that's the time frame that we're in now. He actually gave a time frame for this, and he actually predicted it accurately that this would occur, that there's very few people in the world that are studying with his original teachings. And this is why you see so many misunderstandings in the world. And this is why it's important for you, if you're interested in getting to enlightenment based in the original teachings of the Buddha, that you study his original words, that you don't resort to mere poetry. And there's people, whether they're regular teachers or writing books or even ordained practitioners, who are teaching based in poetry, and they're not actually teaching the original words of the Buddha. They're actually teaching based on things that are easy for the ears, not understanding because they themselves don't study the original teachings of the Buddha. And those discourses that are spoken by the Tathagata, by the Buddha, that's what's going to lead to enlightenment. But these teachings over here that are mere poetry, that's not going to lead to enlightenment. So essentially, it's a waste of time, right? Because you saw previously that first chapter where the Buddha was talking about if you go to an ascetic or Brahmin who is of wrong view and of wrong practice, it's a waste of your time, essentially, because it doesn't lead to enlightenment. And here you can see that in this teaching too, that if you're not studying with the original words of the Buddha, it's not going to lead to any beneficial result for you. So you would like to study with the original words of the Buddha, making sure you have reliable translations and the ability to get help and clarify those so that you can investigate them and examine them. And that's what's going to lead to more and more wisdom so that you can then train the mind and transform the mind. All right, Ihung, we'll go to this next one. I'll accept questions once we get all the way through all of these.
Okay. The words from singleness of mind. Agivasana. The Tathagata teaches the teachings to others only to give them knowledge. When the talk is finished, Agivasana, then I steady my mind internally, quieten it, bring it to singleness, and concentrate it on that same sign of concentration as before, in which I constantly reside. Words that are just so, not otherwise. From the night that he fully awakened monks until the night he attains final nibbana. In this interval, whatever he speaks, talks of, and expounds, all that is just so, not otherwise. Words of immediately effective teachings. Good monks, so you have been guided by me with these teachings, which are visible here and now, immediately effective, inviting inspection, onward leading to be experienced by the wise for themselves.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about these three here. So this first one, what the Buddha is saying is once he teaches something, he steadies his mind internally, he quiets it and brings it to singleness, and that he has this concentration where he's focused on a single object, right? This is the way that you would like to conduct yourself whenever you're in your day-to-day life, whether you're working or you're driving or whatever you're doing, you like to just practice singleness of mind. That's what's going to lead to concentration and focus. Then the Buddha's, actually, this wasn't the Buddha, this was somebody else that was saying this. I forget the person, but it was after the death of the Buddha, somebody was saying that, okay, from the moment that the Buddha got to enlightenment until he died, that's what final enlightenment is. That whatever he spoke about during that period of time, that was in order to help people get to enlightenment, that he shared the teachings that it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. And then words that are immediately effective teachings. This is the teachings of the Buddha. As you learn them, they're immediately effective. So for example, if you understand that loving kindness eliminates anger, hatred, and ill will, if you just understand that simple sentence, now, whenever your mind becomes angry, irritated, annoyed, having frustration or dislike towards other beings, bring in loving kindness, right? If you do this, it's immediate effective, right? You'll be able to see immediately that this is effective to help you. Now, whether you're able to arise that loving kindness is a whole nother question if you've trained your mind, right? But the fact, if you understand his teachings, that it's loving kindness that eliminates anger, hatred, and ill will and all those lesser versions, well, this is immediately effective, because if you apply that teaching, you'll be able to see that it squashes your anger, hatred, and ill will and all those lesser versions. So his teachings are immediately effective. If you learn the breathing mindfulness meditation and you learn how to focus on the breath, and whenever your mind moves off the breath, you cut that off and let it go and bring your mind back to the breath, not counting, not doing the scanning and looking all over the body, not doing puto, but you do what the Buddha taught. You'll see that it's immediately effective, right? And you'll be able to investigate and inspect his teachings, examining them. So as you implement his teachings, you're going to see this immediate effectiveness of his teachings. But of course, you might have to work at implementing his teachings for a bit before you see it becomes effective, because you're not yet implementing it fully in the way that the Buddha taught. But once you do that, that's what's actually going to lead to the improvement, and you'll see immediate effectiveness. And that's how you'll know you're learning through the actual words of the Buddha, the true teachings, because you're going to see improvement to the condition of your mind in your life, and you'll know that that's the true teachings. Because if it's something that isn't the true teachings, it's not going to produce the same effect. Okay, so now we'll move to these two.
Words of the teachings and discipline was to be reside with as one's own island, as one's own refuge. Ananda, it may be that you will think the teacher's instruction has ceased. Now we have no teacher. It should not be seen like this, Ananda. For what I have taught and explained to you as teachings and discipline will at my passing be your teacher. Those monks, Ananda, either now or after I'm gone, who reside with themselves as their own island, with themselves as their own refuge, with no other refuge, who reside with the teachings as their island, with the teachings as their refuge, with no other refuge, it is these monks, Ananda, who will be for me greatest of those dedicated to the training. Words to be undertook as taught, not to be abolished, as long as the monks do not give instruction on anything that has not been taught or abolish anything that has already been taught, but undertake and practice the training guidelines as they have been taught. Only growth is to be predicted for them, not decline. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here, this one, the Buddha's talking about how it's unwise to just follow whatever anybody does and just conform to what others are doing, but instead use the teachings to be able to investigate and examine them so that you can cultivate wisdom and make wise decisions. Sometimes when people see this teaching, they think what the Buddha is saying is you don't need a teacher, just use my teachings. This is untrue. You actually need a teacher. There's only one type of person that can get to enlightenment without a teacher, and that's a Buddha. And those individuals are very rare in the world. So you're going to need a teacher, but that teacher should be teaching based on the original words of the Buddha. But then you don't just follow that teacher. You don't just conform to what that teacher's telling you. Instead, you investigate the teachings. And where you see the teachings and you're learning them and examining, investigating them, you reflect on them to verify them, and then you practice them. Not thinking of it as like, oh, the Buddha's dead, that we no longer have any teacher, but instead, no, we have these teachings. And now you investigate those teachings, and now you make decisions based on wisdom without being a follower. So you're not a follower or a devotee, you're an independent practitioner looking to find the truth through cultivation of wisdom. A teacher is a tour guide pointing out for you the things that you need to learn and understand, and it's you doing that work to investigate and examine the original words of the Buddha with the guidance of a teacher that's helping you to cultivate that wisdom. And then here, this particular discourse, the Buddha is explaining not to teach something that he didn't teach, right? Because if he instructed something and he gave instruction on something, then that's his teachings. But if he didn't teach it, it would be unwise to modify his teachings or change his teachings. It doesn't say it here in this discourse, but he says in other places that if you tried to change his teachings, it would be for your harm and the harm of countless other people. Because a Buddha figures out exactly how to get to enlightenment, and then they spend the rest of their life helping to illuminate that path, light that path up, make it very clear for people of what it takes to get to enlightenment, and then preserve their teachings for others to be able to get to enlightenment. Once anybody changes or modifies the teachings of a Buddha, then it doesn't lead to enlightenment anymore. So if you learn directly with the words of the Buddha and you train in those, there's only growth that's going to be predicted. You're not going to experience regression or decline, because if you're learning the true teachings of the Buddha, you'll see the improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. So let me know what questions you guys have here on any of these discourses that we just read and that we just talked about. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so we'll go to the next one, which is chapter 29. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Yihang, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. Those who cause the good teachings to disappear. Monks. Those monks who explain non-teachings as teachings are acting for the harm of many people, the unhappiness of many people, or the ruin, harm, and suffering of many people, of heavenly beings and human beings. These monks generate much unwholesome karma and cause these good wholesome teachings to disappear. Monks. Those monks who explain teachings as non-teachings. Monks. Those monks who explain non-discipline as discipline. Monks. Those monks who explain discipline as non-discipline. Monks. Those monks who explain what has not been stated and spoken by the perfectly enlightened one, as having been stated and spoken by him. Monks. Those monks who explain what has been stated and spoken by the perfectly enlightened one as not having been stated and spoken by him. Monks. Those monks who explain what has not been practiced by the perfectly enlightened one as having been practiced by him. Monks. Those monks who explain what has been practiced by the perfectly enlightened one as not having been practiced by him. Monks. Those monks who explain what has not been prescribed by the perfectly enlightened one as having been prescribed by him. Monks. Those monks who explain what has been prescribed by the perfectly enlightened one as not having been prescribed by him are acting for the harm of many people, for the unhappiness of many people, for the ruin, harm, and suffering of many people, of heavenly beings and human beings. These monks generate much unwholesome karma and cause these good teachings to disappear. Venerable Sir, it is said, division in the community, division in the community. How is there division in the community? Here, Ananda, monks explain non-teachings as teachings, and teachings as non-teachings. They explain non-discipline as discipline, and discipline as non-discipline. They explain what has not been stated and spoken by the perfectly enlightened one as having been stated and spoken by him, and what has been stated and spoken by the perfectly enlightened one as not having been stated and spoken by him. They explain what has not been practiced by the perfectly enlightened one as having been practiced by him, and what has been practiced by the perfectly enlightened one as not having been practiced by him. They explain what has not been prescribed by the perfectly enlightened one as having been prescribed by him, and what has been prescribed by the perfectly enlightened one as not having been prescribed by him. On these 10 grounds, they withdraw and go apart. They perform legal acts separately and recite the training guidelines of these teachings separately. It is in this way, Ananda, that there is division in the community. But, Venerable Sir, when one causes division in a harmonious community, what does one generate? One generates evil lasting for an eon, Ananda. But, Venerable Sir, what is that evil lasting for an eon? One is tormented in hell for an eon, Ananda. One who causes division in the community is bound for misery, bound for hell, to reside there for an eon. Delighting in division established in non-teachings, he falls away from security from bondage. Having caused division in a harmonious community, he is tormented in hell for an eon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So this was the discourse that I was referring to earlier, that if you change the teachings of a Buddha, it's going to cause his teachings to disappear, and it's going to cause harm for you and countless other beings. And the Buddha is just walking you through it, showing you how it's producing unwholesome karma, that people are explaining teachings as non-teachings, and non-discipline as discipline, and discipline as non-discipline, right? He's just walking you through all of that so you can see that. And he does it in a lot of detail so that you can see exactly what he's talking about. There's another discourse where he says that if you ever come across a teaching that conflicts with what it is that he taught, you should consider that that person has misunderstood his teachings, and you should ignore that discourse. You should ignore that teaching. So by you studying with the original words of the Buddha and knowing what he did teach and he didn't teach, now you can't be misled because you're doing that investigation on your own with the guidance of a teacher. So that now when you see a Facebook meme, or you see somebody in the news talking, or you see even a documentary. I've seen documentaries done by very reputable organizations that have things that are inaccurate about the life of the Buddha and his teachings and so forth. And you'll know that when you see that, and you can ignore that and know that that's not what the Buddha actually taught. But you won't know that if you're not studying with the original words of the Buddha. So here the Buddha ultimately gets to talking about people dividing up the community and splitting up the community, and how that's really unwise and it produces unwholesome karma. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this teaching, which is essentially helping you to understand to not change the teachings and to study his original words, because that's what's going to lead to your enlightenment. Okay, I don't see any questions. This next chapter is essentially the same thing. I don't know that we need to read it. This is very similar, but it's just coming at it from a different angle. It's saying those monks who explain non-teachings as non-teachings, and they explain teachings as teachings, non-discipline as non-discipline, and discipline as discipline. They're working to sustain the teachings, keep them bright and strong and vibrant in the world. And this is producing much wholesome karma. And it's for their own welfare and for the peacefulness and welfare of many people. So it's essentially the same discourse. It's just all the opposites. So I don't think that we need to necessarily go through this because we just studied the other part. But if you guys have questions on this, just let me know. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere from anyone. So I'm going to end class by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to grow and develop on the path to enlightenment. Next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters, which is chapters 31 through 40. So you can study those ahead of time by downloading these books. This is volume 12. You'll find it on our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, and you can study it prior to class or after class, because there's a lot more details in the books than what I share in the classes. So if you're able to study both in the class and outside of class, you're going to get much more benefit out of these classes. And then, of course, as you have questions, you can ask questions in classes. You can post in our Facebook group. You can send me private messages, or you can schedule personal guidance as well, and I will help you. So thank you again for joining for today's class. If you'd like to join tomorrow's group learning program, on Sunday, I'm going to be teaching chapter 15 from volume 1. Chapter 15 is titled True Love, Love Without Attachment. This is where you start to understand what is true love so that you can then practice true love. Because if you're having certain challenges in your relationships, this is because you're most likely not practicing true love. And if you're experiencing true love coming back to you, then you're not going to be able to identify it. But as long as you don't know what true love is, you won't be practicing true love, and you'll find that it's very challenging to experience true love coming back to you. So by understanding what true love is and then practicing it, this is where you can have very harmonious relationships. I'm going to be teaching that tomorrow at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Thai time. And then at 6:30 p.m. Thai time, we have a regular meditation in the Chiang Mai temple at Wat Thong Yu, where I do a meditation in the main hall. So if you're in Chiang Mai, or if you'd like to tune into our live stream, you're more than welcome to join us for meditation at that time as well. And then, of course, you guys know on Wednesdays, I do meditation with you guys and open up to any and all questions that you like. So perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.